We are officially live for the second Tuesday in a row at noon. We are really excited. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Melissa Maloney, and I am here to talk about process today. But Jen is also here. She's running the back end today, so we're going to take turns. Jen, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hello, everyone. So glad you're here with us today. Hope you enjoy it. It'll be awesome.
Amazing. If you were not with us last week, we are starting, we've been doing LinkedIn Live starting last week. We're doing we're doing every week, but every other week you'll hear from the other one of us. So we are focusing 1 week more on I'll say the human side of things, and then the next week we're focusing more on the business side of things, but both things will be human-centered because that's what we do. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about process. And I always laugh because I'm like, oh, I get the boring topics, but I think it's a really, really valuable topic. So I'm excited to chat with you about it. I'm a bit of a process geek. So when I first stepped into leadership, I really thought, you're that young leader going into the job for the first time, and you think about the idea of solving problems, right? My job is to solve problems, it's to get results. But there were definitely those days, as I'm sure all of us can connect with, that whole idea of barely keeping things together, feeling like the boat is going to sink, right? Like you're taping it with duct tape and trying to hold on, trying to keep things together. And at times I had really big teams. And those teams obviously come with personalities. They come with their own pace that they like to work at. They come with their own challenges, all of those things that come with teams and the individuals that make up teams. So as an ops leader, I learned really quickly that if I didn't have strong processes and if we didn't execute on those processes, things were a lot messier than they needed to be. Didn't mean they weren't messy. It just meant they were messier than they probably needed to be. But what I did learn, and the truth that hit me later in my career and as I've been leading people longer, was that processes weren't necessarily about the process as much as they were about the people using the process. And so we tend to think of a process as like a checklist or a flow chart, that whole standard operating procedure. But when we start to shift and start to think of it as being much more than that, ultimately it's a promise. It's a promise that says to your team, I've thought about how to make this easier for you. I've created something that's going to help you succeed. And I want you to win. I've got your back, right? Like that's what we're trying to say with a really solid process. And that's where the emotional intelligence piece of process building comes in, because building strong processes requires us to really think about the people doing the work, to listen to those people, to understand where they're struggling, what energizes them, and what gets in their way. Processes aren't about control. They're much more about building confidence in the people that are on our teams or the people around us. So when people really have those clear, well thought out systems, they don't need to waste energy figuring out, what do I do next? Or what's the next thing on the list? What's the basic thing? Because those systems are the things that allow them more freedom to innovate, to collaborate, to show up, to be their best selves. And then you as a leader, when you're creating these systems, it helps, ideally the goal is that it helps you lead from a place of calm, and getting rid of that whole crisis and chaos mentality that can sometimes come with leadership and what feels like what we deal with leadership all the time. So when we think about the best leaders that we've worked with, I want you to kind of reflect before we get into the meat of this presentation and ask yourself, did they inspire you because they were reacting to every single fire, right? Or did they inspire you because they seemed steady? They always seem to know what to do next. And that is not luck, that was a process. So I really want to shift our thought processes today in terms of how we think about process. I want you to see it not as sort of that boring back office function, but more as the secret weapon, the tool that allows you to lead with confidence, to allows you to be courageous as a leader, and really open up possibility as to what can happen with process. So all of that to say, Jen, if you can flip to our next slide, that would be amazing. Thank you. So I want you to pause for a second and think about this question. So I want you to ask yourselves, are your systems helping your people succeed, or are they quietly holding them back? So are your systems helping people succeed, or are they quietly holding people back? What happens a lot of the times as leaders, when we see a mistake or we have that missed deadline, drives me crazy, or disengagement, we assume it's a people problem. But what if it isn't? What if instead of it being seen as a people problem, we actually started to realize that sometimes it's not the people, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not the people, it's the processes and the systems that they're trying to navigate. Because this, what I've seen over the years, time and time again, is that even the most talented, committed teams can only perform as well as the systems around them allow them to. And if processes are clunky, if things are unclear, if they're inconsistent, it creates stress and frustration and a ton of wasted energy. And we've all know that system. We can all remember that system that we were in at some point where we went, why do we have to do it this way? This is such a waste of time. This is driving me crazy. So when systems are really clear, when they're thoughtful, and when they're designed sort of with the people in mind, then they don't obviously just remove the barriers, but they actually allow people to be more successful. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. They're just reflection questions. You don't need to type in the chat, but I have one question at the end that I'd love for you to throw in the chat if you can. So my first question is that when systems are clear, I want you to think about your daily leadership experience, what processes in your world feels like, and I want you to ask yourself, I'm going to try that one again. What process in your world feels like it takes more energy than it gives? And where is the friction? Okay, so I'm going to give you a second to think about that. So the next question is, when your team struggles, do you usually think first about their skills or about the systems they're working in? So do you think first about their skills or the systems they're working in? Ultimately today, my challenge to you is what would happen if we flipped that answer. And then if your systems were completely effortless, like they worked for your people instead of against them, so systems were just wonderful, what would your leadership style feel like? What would your leadership feel like? What would your team feel like? So if your systems were effortless and they just worked, what would that do for you? And then the final question, and I'd love for you to throw this one in the chat, is that on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that your systems are actually helping your people shine? So 1 to 10 in the chat, how confident are you that your systems are helping people shine? Okay, Jen, if you could flip to the next slide, that'd be great. So, good systems create psychological safety and they reduce stress, okay? They free people to focus on what we want them to be focused on, which is doing their best work. When people don't have structure, it's when things start to fall into chaos, and tend to also be led with control. And so both of those things are like employee engagement killers. So what we want to do is we want to think about, I want you to think about a time when your team felt overwhelmed. not because of workload, because we've all been there where the workload's high, but because no one was quite sure how things were supposed to flow. Right? So when systems are weak or they're unclear, that's when anxiety starts to creep in. People start to second guess decisions. They don't know the boundaries, right? People like to know the boundaries. And then tasks start to fall through the cracks, or we end up having to do more follow-up and more accountability. And as leaders, it feels like we're putting fires out all the time, right? Like it feels like we're just bashing the fires. But what we know is that those strong processes create the clarity, they create the answers, and they eliminate the guesswork. They reduce decision fatigue, which we all have decision fatigue right now, and they give people the confidence to focus on what really matters. When teams are confident, they deliver better results. So we want to really create clarity to reduce anxiety. The next thing that we want to do is we want structures that support creativity and collaboration. Because again, we can have both things. Just because there's systems doesn't mean we don't get to be creative and have wonderful innovation. So what a lot of people don't realize, and sort of the stigma that can be out there, is that structure and systems stifle creativity. But what we want to do is we actually want to do it in such a way that it unlocks it. So if you think about like jazz musicians, these are musicians who do a lot of unplanned things. They improvise, right? And they do it beautifully. If you're into jazz, big saxophone fan, but they do it within a structure that still gives them, there's still a structure there. So in your team, what we're trying to do is when people don't have to waste energy trying to figure out some of the basic things, and there's sort of that clear path there, that's when they actually have more brain energy to think bigger. That's where they have more brain energy to share ideas and to collaborate. So an example that I lived myself was I taught fitness classes for a bunch of years. And the fitness classes that we taught were pre-choreographed. So what that meant was they would ship us every 3 months new music, new choreography, and a video of that choreography and notes of that choreography. And then we memorized it. And so what happened, because it was pre-choreographed, is there was a structure that happened every single time. But then because we memorized it, I didn't have to waste brain power thinking about what move comes next. What thing do I have to do next? And what that allowed me to do was it allowed me to create an experience for the people in the class. I could engage, I could connect, I could spend time focusing on them because I didn't have to worry about the next move because that was already in my brain, that was already there. And that's the same concept of when we have those simple processes in place, it allows people to actually focus on and draw into a different part of their brain to find that success. So the next piece is that processes drive culture, both good culture and bad culture. So when we think about this, whether it's intentional or not, our processes are truly shaping the culture that we have. So the question that you want to ask yourself is around, are the systems actually reinforcing trust and empowerment, or are they breeding frustration and resentment, silos, and disengagement? So what we know is that culture isn't what we say, it's actually what we do. And so that's what we're trying to do in this, right? So what would happen if instead of seeing processes as red tape, right, that we actually saw it as a way to create and drive culture, right? That we saw it as a way to set people up for success, to help people know the boundaries that they could play within. Because it really can be the thing that creates calm and clarity and confidence. So your first takeaway for today, Jen, if you could flip to the next slide, that would be great, is that systems are emotional, okay? So nobody talks about enough the fact that systems are emotional. We think of them as cold, logical, mechanical, but they're not. They are the things that help unlock clarity. They help people not get frustrated. They eliminate anxiety. They give people more brain power and more space to focus, all of the good things. So what I want you to do as a takeaway that you can take right today and do is I want you to audit one system through an emotional lens. So I want you to pick any system that's currently in your workplace with the team you lead, even if you're the person living the system. And I want you to ask yourself, how does this process actually make people feel when they interact with it? Does it make them confident, confused, frustrated? What do they feel when they interact with this system? And if there is friction in the process, consider and reflect, is there a way that you could simplify or clarify it? Okay. If there's anywhere in the system where there is assumptions, instead of sort of looking at it from the perspective of everybody should know this, think about communicating it from an over communication standpoint when it comes to steps, expectations, and outcomes. Okay, there's a lot of kindness in clear communication. And the final piece is you could also involve your team in the process improvement. So asking a team member, where are the systems making your job harder? Or how can we fix it together? Because when people have the ability to co-create solutions, they're obviously going to have more buy-in. Okay. Next slide, please, Jen. So the next piece is the emotional intelligence piece. And this is really, I'm a big believer that if we can actually start to build everything from a foundation of emotional intelligence, it's going to just make the workplace better. So when we design systems that are truly, and we truly take into account humans in each of those systems, and we create an environment where people don't just show up, but they are set up to win and to thrive. This is where systems aren't rigid. They're a blend of clarity and flexibility. Okay, so we're trying to find that sweet spot of clarity, but with flexibility, and where people can use their own brains. So clarity isn't about control, it's about empowerment. Okay, so clear expectations allow people to manage their own actions and behaviors. When people have clear expectations, that's where they can self-manage. They don't need constant direction because they have clear lanes and understanding. It builds confidence, it also builds trust, and it builds autonomy. Okay, it's kind of like when you set the GPS in the car, right? Your team now knows where they're going, they've got the destination, and there might be some flexibility on their route, but they don't need to focus on the route because they know that the GPS is going to get them there. Okay, so the next thing that we want to have is we want feedback loops. So feedback loops is essentially empathy in real time. Okay, so feedback, it's not just performance tool. People need feedback. We as humans need feedback. So when we build in those regular feedback loops into the systems, it essentially creates opportunity for us to say, I see you, I hear you, I feel you, your voice matters. Okay, so we want to build in feedback loops. And this is ultimately EQ at work. This is emotional intelligence happening live. Okay, and the final piece is flexibility. So with flexibility, we want to build systems in a way that it can still take into account individuality. We need people to be able to leverage their individual strengths. So emotionally intelligent systems, have room for people to understand what their unique strengths are and understand how their strengths fit into that system in a way that helps them to be better, right? They don't assume that everybody's going to approach a problem the exact same way. They allow for some space. They allow for different work styles. They allow for different personalities, and they allow for different life circumstances. All of the things that can happen because we are humans and we're doing all of this from a human-centered approach. So there's enough flexibility where it unlocks things and ideally gets people to commit to them even harder because of that. So it's where people really start to feel safe because they know as long as I'm in this box, I'm safe. And that safety actually opens up potential for people. So my question before we move to the next slide and the next takeaway is, are your systems supporting emotional intelligence, or are they stripping it out? So when you build systems with people in mind, We really want to look at it from a culture standpoint and start to ask ourselves, are we elevating culture and results, or are we pulling it down? So the reflection question again is, are your systems supporting emotional intelligence, or are they stripping it out? Okay, so keep that in mind as we go to the next takeaway. Jen, if you can flip to the next slide, that would be great. So culture isn't about posters on the wall, which we all know, can't stand the posters on the wall, they become wallpaper. It's about the experience that people actually feel every single day. And this is so much harder since we have gone to remote work environments, but it's so much more important now than ever. So the systems in place need to send a message that says we value people, we value your input, and we care about what you're saying to us. So what we know is culture is created because of what's repeated, right? So one of the things that I wish I had learned earlier in my leadership career was that is the idea that process shaped culture. And I think I understood it was there, but I didn't totally understand how when I first started leading, because I did work for a very process driven organization, but the processes were very much deemed as micromanagement. And so it's that reflection and understanding to try and understand, how do we make processes that don't feel like micromanagement? And that's where the people side of it comes in, right? We want systems that are built to reward transparency, to reward collaboration, to celebrate innovation, because if we build systems that allow for those things to happen, then those things become part of the culture. And so we want people first systems. But if the systems are built in a way where they reinforce silos because maybe people don't have access to information, or they lead to confusion, which is just never good and a complete waste of energy and makes people start to second guess every decision they make, or they lead to finger pointing, because, so-and-so didn't do this part of this system and therefore, right? Those are the things that can build the negative culture, which is obviously not what we're trying to do. So reflecting, and sort of your takeaway on this is to spend some time reflecting on what are some of the unspoken messages in your systems. So what are the processes teaching people about what's valued in your organization or on your team, right? So if approvals are always slow, are you unintentionally teaching people to avoid risk or stop innovating? Because if I have to get approval in order for me to move forward with anything, and approvals are slow, you're stifling the speed of innovation. So, real life example, I led a lot of young people, and they had there was a lot of customer service that had to be done. And so I told people very early on in their training, like usually like day 1, day 2, I'd say, listen, I can't possibly train you on every situation that's going to happen because it's people. I don't know what people are going to do tomorrow. But what I can tell you is I trust you, and I trust you to make a good decision. And as long as the decision is going to cost the company less than $500, that was the number that I picked, $500, make the decision. I will support you in the decision. I've called customers and told them they owe us money. I've called customers and told them I owe them money. If it's less than $500, make the call. I support you. I don't think I had to make more than probably 3 phone calls ever, because the decision wasn't what I would have done, or it wasn't one that I could live with. But it created a structure to allow them to think for themselves in a way that was flexible enough, but still had a boundary. And so it's starting to look at some of those things. And what I was trying to say in that message was, please don't come to me with every single question that you have, because I don't have time for that. So I'm going to create a boundary for you to be successful. Okay. So the second question, the second reflection, is to identify a process that if you could tweak it to reflect your values better, what would you do to it? I know you might not have total power and control over processes in your workplace. So the question is, if there was a process that you could tweak to reflect your values better? What process would it be and how would you tweak it? Okay. So ultimately, doing some reflection to connect the culture to your process. I just looked at the clock and I realized I'm behind. Let's go. Next slide, Jen, the 3 C's framework. So we've talked about processes, not just checklists. So what we want to look at from the 3 C's of emotionally intelligent process setting, we first have clarity. So we wanted to make sure everybody knows what success looks like. Clarity's first. It's the most important layer. People need to know how to win. Okay. So what does great look like in your organization or on your team? Who owns it? What are the non-negotiables? What's flexible? Turn on the lights in a dark room. Give people that clarity. Okay. The second C is consistency. Consistency is what builds trust. I believe it's one of the most important characteristics for leadership is to be consistent. People can't have changes all the time. There has to be a level of consistency. It has to be the same regardless of who's in charge in most cases. It doesn't mean rigidity, but it does mean fairness. It means your team knows what to expect and they feel safe navigating in the system. So there has to be some consistency. And the third is connection. So connection ensures that processes make people feel valued, makes people feel heard. And it is such a powerful tool. And this is really that people side of things. It's about listening. It's about taking feedback, implementing feedback, adjusting for real life challenges. Okay, that's connection, which takes us to takeaway number 3. Next slide, please, Jen. Number 3 is you don't have to overhaul everything. Okay, processes take time. And small things can make really big impacts. And ultimately, that's actually the better processes. Small, simple things can really create trust and can really create resilience. So if there's one thing that I really hope that I can leave you with today, it's a level of hope around the fact that we don't have to burn everything down and start from scratch. It's really about just looking for those little operational transformations that can come with the tiniest of shifts. So when we start reflecting on systems from a people perspective and start to ask ourselves, how do we set people up to win? How are we lining them up for success? What are the boundaries that they need in order to know how to execute in their role? That's where we build trust. That's where resilience strengthens. And that's where the team really starts to thrive. So even in the face of challenges, these things can happen. So what I want you to do is I want you to identify a friction point in your team's workflow. So ask yourself or ask your team, where do people seem frustrated, disengaged, or confused? Where is that friction point? It's not a bad thing to have friction points. We all have them. But where is sort of a consistent friction point that you've been seeing? And all I want you to do is make one small tweak in the process, in that friction point. A clearer timeline, maybe a simplified approval, that's the word. I was like, improvement is not a word. Approval process, right? Just a small tweak, okay? So the second thing I want you to do is ask yourself, how's the process working for you at your text team meeting? So now ask the team for some feedback, right? Listen to that feedback. And perhaps there's something small that you can change in that feedback, okay? And then the final challenge is to try and flex one rigid rule. So identify one area that feels a little rigid, okay? But one that you can offer a little bit of flexibility to honor individualism and to give people some control and some power back within the systems without it compromising the outcome. Okay, so look for somewhere in your systems that you can do that. Next slide, please. So the reality is this: systems don't change unless we as leaders do. We are the system's biggest influencer. Our mindset, our habits, and even our blind spots are always echoed in the way that our team operates every single day. So you have to ask yourself, are you modeling the behaviors that you want your team to adopt? Are you empowering your people to bring feedback or unintentionally shutting it down? Are you leading from a place of trust or from a place of control? Okay. Our own behaviors are the things that lead to this. We are at 12:30, so I'm going to honor your time. And I'm not going to ask you the questions that I was going to have you drop in the chat. So I'm going to save them. But if anybody wants the questions, message me and I will flip them to you because they're good reflection questions. And Jen, just for the sake of time, if you can flip 2 slides to our upcoming events, I will wrap there and just say that, you know, these are the types of conversations that we are trying to continue. And we really want to support you in your leadership journey. So we hope that you're taking these into action. But if you have questions or want to talk further, definitely reach out. Our next session next week is on Tuesday again at noon again. And Jen is speaking leading with empathy. So the secret skill that you're not using enough. So really excited about that. And then I will be back the week after that talking about setting clear expectations. You'll notice the process here. And that final slide, Jen, I just want to say thank you for joining us. I apologize for taking an extra minute of your time, but I'm really grateful to have had all of you with us today, and hopefully you got something, and thank you for participating. You can join us for counseling, for coaching, for masterminds, for our monthly Let's Get Intentional sessions, lots of ways to interact, and we'd love to have you. Have an amazing day, everybody. Thank you.